Hello! In this video I'm going to show you how I make a simple pasta dish that uses some pantry staples along with some leftover grilled chicken I had. I'm also going to show you how I make some fresh pesto using some basil from my herb garden. So I'll head out into the herb garden and I'll clip off some basil. Right now this is pretty overgrown, so I'll show you how I can make pesto two ways so I can use some of this up. But first, here's how I trim off the basil I'm going to use, while still letting the basil plant grow and keep getting more stems. If you look to see where the plant splits, and there's two little leaves, you just need to trim off right at the top of that spot. Then those little guys will grow into new stems that we can use later. But here's a good overflowing handful, so this should be good enough for a couple small batches of pesto. So let's head inside and I'll show you what we'll do to get this made. It was funny, when I brought this back in, I noticed we had a little friend along, so I had to take him back out into the garden before I got started. Here are the main ingredients we'll be using for the pesto, besides our caterpillar friend. First is the cheese. I'm going to use Parmesan, but you can also use Romano, and then the pine nuts here are used as the binder. You can also sub in walnuts, which will work well too. And I'll toast these pine nuts a little bit before we use them as well. You typically will add in garlic as well, but I'm going to add it into the pasta recipe, so I'm going to leave it out here. Then there's salt, which will act as an abrasive as we grind all this up, and then lastly the basil. And we need to break down this basil. So I'll do that first, just by pinching off the leaves from the stems. And then you can actually add the stems to your tomato sauce to add some basil flavor as well. Or you can use it just to season your oil before you start cooking, to give it a little boost in basil flavor. And then I'll also toast the pine nuts here too. I'm just putting them into an empty pan on medium heat, and then I'll keep them moving around until they start to get a little bit of color, and they'll start to smell fragrant. Then once they have the right amount of color, I'll take them off the heat and we'll get them into a dish so we can use them next. And now we can make the pesto. The first method I'll show you is kind of the classic or old way of doing it by mortar and pestle. And then I'll show you the faster way, which is using a food processor as well. I like to use my mojete here because the surface is a bit rougher and is a bit faster than my smoother marble mortar and pestle. I'll add in the pine nuts first just to get those ground up, and then I'll start adding in basil a little bit at a time. I'll also add in some salt to act as an abrasive to help break down the leaves as well. And as it all breaks down, I'll add in more and more and keep going until I've got about 2 cups of basil added. Then I'll add in the olive oil until it turns into the right consistency. And then I'll finish it off with cheese. Then I'll adjust anything as needed as I taste it, and this was good as it was. But here, if you have to, you can add in a little bit more cheese, or pine nuts if it's tasting a little bit too bitter from the basil. If something is standing out a bit too much, you can tone it down by adding the other ingredients. And because we're smashing the basil, it does turn into this color, which isn't super appealing, but it does taste good. Next, I'll basically just put all those same ingredients into the food processor and then let it rip. Although there's kind of an order here so the machine runs properly. First, I'll start with the basil, toasted pine nuts, and salt. Those will run until the pine nuts are broken up and the basil is starting to break down too. Then I'll loosen it up by drizzling in some olive oil while the machine is running before I add in the cheese at the end. And as it blends, I'll need to scrape down the sides a few times before it gets to the consistency that I like. But both ways turn out great, and if I'm putting it on top of something, I like the color that comes out of the food processor a little bit better. Now that we have the pesto ready, I'll get some water on to boil before I prep the other ingredients. And I'm just using some leftover noodles I have in my pantry, but you can use any shape that you like. I'll also be using fresh baby spinach here, and I'll finish the sauce with heavy cream. I've also got some Parmesan Reggiano. The recipe also calls for half a white onion to add a little bit of sweetness, and because I didn't add the garlic to the pesto, I'll be adding it here. And I'll also add in some leftover grilled chicken from the other night as well. And then of course the sun-dried tomatoes, along with some chicken stock too. First to prep is the garlic, and I'll cut up 2 cloves. And then I'll take out 3 sun-dried tomatoes and dice those up. And I'll also want to add in some of the oil from the jar as well. It adds a lot of flavor when we go to cook everything. Then I'll dice up half an onion, along with the grilled chicken. And I try to cut them into bite-sized cubes. And now with all that prepped, I'll head over to the stove and get my Dutch oven on medium heat with a little bit of oil in the bottom. And then I'll go in with the onions first. That way they have a chance to cook down before I add the other ingredients. And I'll cook those for about 4 minutes or so until they start to go translucent. They'll keep cooking with the other ingredients, so I don't actually have to cook them all the way here. Next, I'll add in the garlic and allow that to get a little surface contact with the oil as well. Then the chicken will go in so I can heat that back up. And it's already seasoned, so I don't need to be adding anything here to season the chicken. I'll also add in the sun-dried tomatoes along with the oil from the jar at the same time. Then I'll add in the spinach so that can wilt down as we cook it. Then once it is cooked down, I will add in some chicken stock so I can break up anything that is gathered on the bottom and start making the sauce. And I'm going to let that reduce down for just a little bit, but I don't want all of it gone because I want the noodles to soak up some of it too. And that will happen because I undercooked the noodles slightly. That way they can pull in the flavor of the sauce as they finish cooking. And if it starts to look a little dry, we can add in more stock or pasta water as needed. But this looks good. I'll also add in the pesto here too. I don't really want to cook it much because it will lose some of its freshness, so I add it near the end when I have the heat turned down low. Then once it is all mixed together well, I will add in the cream last. I don't use much here because sometimes it can just blank out all the other flavors we've built. So I only put about 3 tablespoons, which should be enough to coat everything. And I'm also going to be adding in some Parmesan next too, which will also thicken everything up. And I turned off the heat before I mix in the cheese, otherwise it has a chance to separate it as it cooks. Then after I add in the cheese, I'll give it a good mix so it all melts together, and then I can start to taste it to see what we're missing. And with a lot of dishes, nothing is too exact here. Some people might like to add a little bit of red pepper flake here, or just plain black pepper. Others might not like the spice cutting through the creaminess and sweetness, so it's up to you what you want to add here to make it taste the way that you like it. Although I like a little black pepper here. Then to plate this up, I'll add it to a bowl and top it with our pesto along with some more grated cheese on top. And this turned out really great. It was a really good use of some of our leftovers and pantry items, and will make for an awesome dinner or make-ahead lunch as well. So I hope you give this a shot, and if you do, let me know how it turned out for you. And if you like these one-pot pasta dishes, check out this video I made a while back using sausage and broccolini. Thanks for watching, hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.